The interest in dismantling the U.S. Department of Education comes primarily from conservatives, libertarians, and some education reform advocates who argue that the federal government should not have control over education policy. Here are the main reasons why some people support eliminating or significantly downsizing the Department of Education. 1. Education is not a federal responsibility. Critics argue that education is not mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, meaning it should be left to states and local governments under the 10th Amendment. They believe the federal government has overstepped its authority by imposing national education policies. 2. Federal overreach and bureaucracy. Opponents argue that the DOE creates one-size-fits-all mandates that do not account for regional differences in education needs. They point to policies like Common Core and No Child Left Behind as examples of excessive federal control that burden local schools with bureaucracy instead of improving education quality. 3. Declining educational outcomes despite federal involvement. Many critics claim that despite billions of dollars in federal funding, the U.S. has seen stagnant or declining test scores in key subjects like math and reading. They argue that the DOE has failed to improve education despite decades of intervention. 4. School choice and parental rights. Some believe that the DOE's regulations limit school choice options, such as charter schools, homeschooling, and voucher programs. They argue that abolishing the DOE would allow parents and local governments to make more decisions without federal interference. 5. Federal funding inefficiencies. The DOE distributes over $80 billion in funding annually, yet critics argue that much of this money is wasted on administrative costs rather than going directly to classrooms. They claim that reducing or eliminating the DOE would result in more efficient spending at the state and local level. 6. Political influence in education. Some believe the DOE is too politicized, pushing ideological agendas through funding decisions and curriculum guidance. They argue that local communities should have more control over what is taught in schools. Who supports this idea? Libertarians. They advocate for minimal federal government involvement in all sectors, including education. Some conservatives. Many Republicans have proposed eliminating or downsizing the DOE to give more power to states. Education reform advocates. Some believe decentralizing education would allow for more innovation, competition, and localized decision-making. Arguments against dismantling the DOE. Ensures equal education access. The DOE enforces civil rights laws that prevent discrimination in education, provides funding for special education in low-income schools. Federal grants and programs support Title I schools, disabled students, and Pell Grants for college students. National standards help maintain quality. Some argue that a minimum national standard prevents states from underfunding or neglecting education. Conclusion. The debate over dismantling the Department of Education is rooted in larger philosophical differences about the role of the federal government. Supporters see it as a costly, inefficient bureaucracy that interferes with local education, while opponents believe it plays a critical role in funding, equity, and national standards. Whether the DOE will ever be abolished is unlikely, but efforts to reduce its power and shift control to states continue to be a major issue in education policy debates.